What can you build with no code? We are going to dive deep into this today. If you have questions about the no code space, no code apps, no code tools, or if you're just getting started, maybe you're building your very first app and you still have some questions, this is the video for you. Now, make sure you stick around until the end because we're going to talk about different types of platforms, what you can build with no code, like the different types of apps, some examples of what you can build with no code. We're going to talk about low code versus no code. What are the differences and what do you really need to know? And limitations. What should you be aware of as you move forward? Now, first, if you're new around here, my name is Kristen and I'm the co-founder of Coaching No Code Apps, where we help non-technical entrepreneurs build apps without coding so they can start their app-based businesses or grow their existing businesses with no tech background required. So what I'm going to do is share my screen here, and we are going to jump over to this Notion page here that has a whole list of topics, really questions that we're going to go through, questions that we see come up a lot as it relates to no code. So first, I want to talk about some platforms, some differences in platforms. Now, we're not going to go through a full platform comparison because there are a ton of no-code tools out there, but I want to give you some examples of different types of no-code platforms because they are certainly not the same. We do have other videos that go into how to choose the right no-code platform, so definitely check those out if you have a question about this. But we're going to go through 4 different examples of how you can use different no-code platforms. So the first one is bubble.io. Now, Bubble is a platform that we personally use with our own clients and students. And one of the reasons we use it is because it's very broad and all-encompassing. So we're going to jump over to the Bubble landing page here, and you can see that their header says build anything without code. And that's because Bubble is really versatile. You really can build mostly any type of app that you want. It's kind of like you get a blank canvas, both from a functionality standpoint and from a design standpoint. So whatever you have in your head, chances are it can be built on Bubble. Okay, so this is an example of a platform that's really all-encompassing, broad, very powerful, and that you can really use it for most things. You're not going to come up against too many limitations when it comes to functionality, features, being able to achieve different types of features within your app. Now, to compare that, we also have platforms like Stacker, which are a little bit more niche. So with Bubble, again, you can kind of build anything and everything. You can build internal apps, you can build external apps, meaning, an internal app is an app you might use for your own company's processes, right? An external app would be one that you launch to external users. So with something like Stacker, which is a little bit different, I'll go over to their landing page as well. With Stacker, you're going to be building your app based on your own data. So you can see here, they say, turn your spreadsheets and data into beautiful, functional, custom web apps. So with Bubble, for example, or with a platform like that, that really is kind of like a blank canvas, you are also building your database on the platform. You can connect to external databases if you want to, but you have the capability to build your own database on Bubble. With something like Stacker, it's a little bit more niche. This is mostly used for internal apps. So internal company business processes, for example. Maybe your current company's processes run on spreadsheets. Well, with Stacker, you can take that spreadsheet and turn it into an app. So you'll still be using your own spreadsheet. The data is tied to that. So it's a little bit more niche, a little bit more narrow. And then we also have platforms like ShareTribe. Now, ShareTribe is really different. This is a platform that's just specifically focused on marketplace apps. So if you're building a marketplace app and you don't want to build it from scratch like you otherwise would on Bubble, for example, well, then you could use ShareTribe. And this is a quick way. It's basically like a marketplace template where you can put your own look and feel on it and launch your marketplace app. Now, there are some caveats here, but the thing about platforms like ShareTribe is that they're really niche, right? If you're using ShareTribe, it's for one specific thing. It's because you're building a marketplace app. Now we'll go back into some of the caveats of some of these platforms and with ShareTribe in just a minute, but just to continue going through our platform examples, we also have something like Zapier. Now, Zapier is a little bit different in that with Zapier, you're not building your own entire app. You're taking apps that you already use, and Zapier just connects them, right? It just lets them talk to each other. So it's, they have here, connect your apps and automate workflows. So if you have, if you use Gmail, for example, Dropbox, Slack, well, then you can connect all of those and let them kind of communicate with each other using Zapier. So if you came into Zapier and you said, if I get a new email in Gmail and you connect your Gmail account, then I want to copy the attachment from Gmail to Dropbox. So you connect to your Dropbox account. And then I want an alert on Slack about the Dropbox file. So you connect your Slack account. Okay, so you already have all of these existing apps and you're just intertwining them. So again, we have tons of no-code platforms that we could go through. I don't find it very helpful to do a full feature or spec comparison on all of them and to let you sort of dig through that, because if you can understand more so the different types of platforms, so not the specific platforms, but just the different use cases, you can narrow it down for yourself a lot more easily. So one of the reasons why we use Bubble is because our clients and our students, they really want full power over customizing their app in every possible way they could imagine. They want to be able to tweak anything and everything. They want full control over the app, and they want the control, right? They don't want to have to rely on a developer forever. They want to be able to do it. And Bubble is great for that. Even if you are building a spreadsheet-driven app, even if you are building a marketplace app, right? Bubble can still be great for those if you're wanting that extra level of customization, that extra level of control. Now, when you look at a platform like Stacker, if you don't care to have that control, right? If you really just need something simple that takes your data and spits it out just in the way that you want, then you don't have to spend time, comparing all these other platforms that do all these other things if you don't even need those things, right? So it's not always helpful to look at the specs if you don't actually need them. And the same is true for ShareTribe. If you're building a marketplace app, yeah, you're going to have to compare, pricing, of course, that's a factor that comes into play. Customization, right? So for example, with ShareTribe, you can't necessarily customize the platform or your app. You can't customize your app in a ton of ways, or at least not without the help of a developer. But if you don't need that customization, right, well, then you don't have to look elsewhere. And with Zapier, the same is true, right? If you don't even need your own fully packaged app, if you just want things to be able to communicate with each other, well, it's a simple solution. It's a simple answer for you. So instead of, pulling together an entire list, try to narrow it down to actually what you need, what your use cases are, and then you can go from there. Now, and again, we do have other videos that do more of a deep dive into how to choose a platform for yourself. So definitely check those out if you want to dig deeper on this particularly. Now, moving down to low code versus no code. This is another question that I see a lot, and it can be a little bit confusing because some no code platforms seem to advertise themselves as low code. And so, how do you really know if you're going to have to be able to code or not? And there are some differentiators. So for example, with Bubble is a no-code platform. You can build what you want without coding, but you can add custom code if you want to. Okay, you don't need to, but you can if you want to. And this, it opens up options for some people who do actually want to code, because there are people who come to a platform like Bubble because they don't want to spend the time it would otherwise take them to code an app. Maybe they are developers already, or they are trained in traditional development, or they know different development languages, but they just don't want to take the amount of time that it would take them to build an app normally. So they come to Bubble. But having the ability to add custom code, if you want to, can really make things a lot more flexible for you. So that's something where you don't have to feel like you're locked in if you really do want to add that extra level of customization for whatever reason. Now, there are platforms that are low code where some coding is required for the customizations. Okay, so we have, we talked about ShareTribe, and I mentioned there was kind of a caveat with a platform like ShareTribe. So ShareTribe, and I'm just using this one as an example, but remember there are lots of platforms out there. It is a no-code platform in some ways, and it's a low-code platform in some ways. So ShareTribe is a platform that offers two different versions of their product. So it's ShareTribe Go and ShareTribe Flex. So I have this comparison page up here, and let me scroll down to, let's see. So can you custom build more features is one of the items on the list here. And with ShareTribe Go, which is the cheaper, more templated version of their product or platform, you can't custom build more features. So what you see is what you get. So with ShareTribe Go, if you're building a marketplace app, you're not really building a marketplace app on ShareTribe Go. You're using their marketplace template and you are adding your own look and feel to it. So the functionality that is there is the functionality you get. You can't customize the functionality. You can only customize the look and the feel. But with ShareTribe Flex, you can custom build more features. So if you do want more functionality that's outside of the box that they give you, then you can do that. But the caveat for some is that it does require custom coding. So if you don't have that skill, then you're going to have to hire a developer. And they have a quote or kind of an expectation on here somewhere, and I'm not going to dig for it right now, but it gives you like an estimated cost of what it might look like to hire a developer for ShareTribe Flex. And it's, several thousand per month that you could expect, I believe, if you do want to add on custom code. So in terms of low code versus no code is no code. You don't have to code. Some no code platforms are still going to give the ability to add custom code if you want to, but you don't have to. Low code it can be no code in the example of ShareTribe, but you're often not going to get the customization capability that you might want. And if you do want to be able to customize, well, that's where the low code comes in, meaning you are going to have to code. And if you aren't going to do that yourself, you're going to have to hire someone. So, why would you use low code over just coding all together, just, outsourcing to, maybe a traditional development agency? Well, you still, for example, with ShareTribe Flex, you're still getting the base of the platform. And so a lot is already done for you. So really your costs would be more so, could be maintenance, could be iterations, right? So it could be a smaller scope for the initial development because a lot of it is already done for you. And then some maintenance fees or iterations, as you launch and start bringing users on board, add features, and all of that. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of how to think about no code and how to think about low code. And this again goes back to, when you're trying to make your final decision, well, what is it that you need and want, both in the immediate and in the long term? Do you want to have to code at all? Do you want to have to outsource at all? That's one of the really big questions. So hopefully that helps you kind of differentiate between low code and no code. Now, I want to get into what's possible. What is possible on no code? Now, if you think back to the kind of comparison of some of the example platforms that we went to, I had mentioned that you can build pretty much anything you want on no code. Now, some people might disagree, and that's okay. I'm going to explain to you what that means and what you can expect realistically. Okay, now I'm going to use examples of existing apps, platforms, services that you are likely aware of to show you examples of what's possible. So let me close out of these tabs here. Okay, so I'm going to group these into types of apps, because at the end of the day, you can have, a blue million different niche features and customizations, but at the core, there are only so many different types of actual apps that you're going to be building. And these are some of the most common ones that we see. So for example, e-commerce sites. E-commerce sites are pretty common, and you can build e-commerce sites on a variety of different platforms. Now, again, I mentioned that we personally use Bubble with our clients, with our students. And so I'll use Bubble as an example here, but know that, again, there are other platforms out there as well where you can build different versions of these types of things with different specifications, different levels of customization, different levels of potential outsourcing, right? So just keep in mind the comparison of types of platforms as we go through this. So e-commerce sites. An example would be something like Etsy. So Etsy is where you can come on and search for and buy products. And the vendors on Etsy are listing their products. And so you are, there are lots of different features that can be included in an e-commerce site, but essentially you're coming on to buy products. Okay, so something like Etsy is doable with no code, right? You can build an app like this with no code tools. You can build these types of features with no code tools, right? We've seen people build different types of e-commerce sites for their own industries, for their own niches, use cases, and all of that. So this would be a really good example of what you could build on no code, which might surprise some people to know that there's so much versatility. You can also build appointment scheduling apps. These are ones we see pretty commonly with people who are building apps for their own use, or who are building appointment scheduling apps for really niche use cases, niche industries, or maybe who are building appointment booking or scheduling features as one of the main components of their app. So maybe their app isn't an appointment scheduling app, but that's still one of the main kind of bulk features. So an example of this would be something like Calendly, right? This is where you can come on and you can share your calendar with someone. They can book an appointment, a meeting in the calendar, and you can have notification emails sent out, and you can have reminder emails sent out to make sure the person's going to join the meeting at the right time. You can have a payment system integrated with this. So maybe someone schedules an appointment and then they have to pay before things are finalized, or maybe they have to pay before they even can schedule an appointment, right? So this is a type of app that you can build, or a set of features you can build within another type of app if that's needed for you. So sometimes with marketplace apps, for example, we'll see people building scheduling or booking features in a marketplace app because it's a common feature you see with a lot of them. So this is definitely something that you could build with no code, and we see these types of features built really frequently within our own clients' apps. So that brings us to marketplace apps. Marketplace apps are very, very common. Now, there are the big marketplace apps that you use today, like the Ubers and the Airbnbs, right? Airbnb and Uber, everyone knows about Airbnb and Uber, right? You can build apps like these, but what we see a lot are really niche marketplace apps. So marketplaces for the industries that just aren't served yet. Marketplaces for industries where they haven't fully been brought into the tech space, or they haven't really been brought up to speed with current technology. So they're still dealing with lots of inefficiencies in their processes and sourcing and connecting and all of that. And so we see marketplace apps a lot in the no-code space. Now, again, Airbnb, Uber, I'm using these as examples because everyone knows what these are, but you can build apps like these using no code. And especially, think back to Airbnb when it was first kind of becoming more well-known. Right now, Airbnb has tons of different features and options of things you can do. They've evolved significantly. And you can still build in, you could build those types of features with no code. But especially if you think back again to the core of Airbnb, it's a marketplace app connecting travelers and hosts, right? Pretty straightforward, definitely something you can build using no code tools. You could build something like Uber. We see clients sometimes building delivery apps, so marketplace apps where it connects people to get deliveries of something. This is a pretty common thing. So it's a little bit different than Airbnb, still a marketplace app. So marketplace apps of all different kinds you can build using no-code tools. Now you can also build listing directories, and this is a really common one we see as well. So think about job board apps. So something like Indeed, you can find jobs or you can post jobs. So as a company, if you want to post a job for a role you want to hire for, as an applicant, if you want to find a job, you can search different types of jobs, different companies. You can search by location. You can, filter your searches. The core of this is listings and search, really. And this is something that we see a lot. Job board apps are another different type of app that we see being built a lot in the no-code space, kind of for similar reasons as the marketplace apps, where we have job board apps like Indeed that are really big. If we're thinking about marketplace apps and we think of Airbnb or maybe like Amazon, they're big. They do so much and they kind of serve anyone and everyone. Indeed is kind of the same way, right? Really big, serving a lot of different people. Well, a lot of entrepreneurs or new founders of apps build listing apps like this for their own industries, for their own niches. So maybe a job board, but for their specific industry, because they know how to best serve that industry. They know the bottlenecks, the different problems and processes that those industries have. So this is a really common one. Something like Zillow as well. So, Zillow is where you can search for homes, search for homes or apartments to rent. You can also sell your home, right? So it's a listing directory, and it's essentially search and listings. And so this is another common one, especially real estate apps in general, where different niche sort of apps can cater to different types of people, different locations potentially. And so this is something you can build using no-code tools as well. Moving down our list, you can see there's a lot here. CRMs, right? So customer relationship management systems. So kind of like HubSpot, for example. HubSpot lets you, sort of keep track of all your leads or of your customers. It really helps you manage all of your customer relationships. And, you can have pipelines, you can have lead magnets, you can have, scoring systems within all of your contacts that help you know when to reach out to people and, all of that. So really just a whole management system. And this is something that you can build on no code as well. You can also build dashboard apps for statistics and analytics. An example of this would be Salesforce. So Salesforce lets you build dashboards, or lets you create dashboards that help you, again, just kind of keep track of analytics statistics. And this is something that we see being built with no code pretty frequently, especially in two use cases. People building apps for their own companies where they want to be able to customize exactly what they want and build it themselves so that when they want to change it, they can. And also people building apps not for their own companies, but for industries in which they have maybe a longstanding career where they work with this type of thing on a daily basis, and they've used the other methods that are currently in place. They've used the other software that's currently in place, and it's just too outdated. And so people want to build something that, again, kind of pulls those industries into current times, brings them up to date with technology, and helps them operate more smoothly. So that's something that you can build on no code. You can also build messaging apps. So for private chat, for forums or group chats. And this is another one where this could be your entire app, but we also see it oftentimes as components of bigger apps. So a bigger app that is for something else, but where the founder wants to include some sort of a chat or messaging system. So an example of this is Reddit, right? Most people know Reddit. This is just a forum, really, where people are messaging. It's pretty basic, really, at its core. And these are types of features that you can build with no-code tools, again, either as a standalone app if you want, or within your other app, or within your app as a whole, rather. You can build social apps. We all know the social media apps that we use day in and out. When we see social apps being built, at least for our own clients, it's usually not like someone who's trying to be the next Facebook or Instagram, but instead someone who is trying to create a way for people to connect in their own industries or niches, or maybe they have an app for an industry and they want to create a social aspect to it. So this is usually sometimes it's an app as a whole if it is pretty segmented, but it's often a set of features within a bigger app that serves a broader purpose. So LinkedIn, though, is a good example of this, right? LinkedIn lets people create a profile, lets people search profiles, and lets people connect or follow or share, all of these things, upload photos, all of that. That's a good example of just basic functionality within a social type of app. And that's something that you can build with no code. You can also build project and task management apps. These are apps that we see a lot as well. And again, for internal company use, for use where someone who doesn't have their own company but might be working in an industry and seeing the bottlenecks and who wants to create an industry specific project and task management app, or as a feature set within an app that serves a broader purpose. But our example here is Asana. If you haven't used Asana, it's a project management app. It lets you create projects, create tasks, assign, track progress, check things off, and all of these things that go into managing a project. This is something that you can build with no code. You can build these types of features and this type of management functionality with no code tools. And the last example we're going to go through is file management. It's another one we see a lot. File management, kind of like Dropbox, right? Dropbox is everything you need for work all in one place. Now, as Dropbox has evolved, there's a lot more functionality, a lot more options, but at its core, it's for saving files, right? And you can see here, finally allow all your tools, content, and collaborators from the same place, or to access everything from the same place. These are types of features you can build with no code tools. And again, this is one where we see people incorporating this as a feature set within their overall app often, or building it as an app, on its own for their specific industry, that type of thing. So long list there, and technically not exhaustive, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of all the different types of things you can build with no-code tools. When I say you can build most things with no-code tools, you really can. Now, there are some other things that I want to touch on to help expand that statement, okay? Now, the first one is you can also build shopping carts or shopping cart systems where you integrate with payment apps like Stripe or PayPal, for example. So, for most of the apps that we just went through, or a lot of them at least, you're going to need a payment system of some sort, right? Well, you have services like Stripe, services like PayPal, where you can simply integrate with them, okay? And you can add that on to your app. So you can create whatever payment system or method of monetization, payment model, all the things, you can create whatever you want for your app. Now, I do want to say that looking back at our different platform examples up here, right? I can't speak to every single no-code platform on whether or not you can just add Stripe or PayPal, right? But speaking to Bubble specifically, this is an easy integration. You can use a plugin where most of the work is already done for you. You can do a custom integration if you need to, because you want that extra level of customization. Okay, so if you want to, and if you have that need, then you can integrate with payment systems. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that there are many, many, many APIs in the world. So APIs essentially let you connect and share information between other outside apps or platforms, resources, all of those things. So if there's a few ways to think about this. So if you have a very, very specific use case or need for your app where you have to access data from an existing and external platform or service in some way, and you need to figure out a way to build maybe an interface or just the app that communicates with that platform. So maybe you have the platform or you have the service that you want to connect to, the API is there and you just need something to connect to it. Well, you can do that, right? If you were using Bubble, for example, you could build the app and then you could connect with the API. Also, and that's more of a niche scenario, but if you have the app idea first and you're building the app first and you want some extra piece of functionality that maybe you don't want to build or maybe you find challenging to build, you can connect to other services via API. So maybe you want to build the scheduling features or the booking features into your app, right? So maybe your app is a job board app where once applicants connect with companies and they move into the interview stage, you want them to be able to book an interview on the app, for example. Well, if you have that scheduling functionality needed in your app, but it's pretty basic and maybe you don't want to build it, well, you could connect to something like Calendly if you wanted to via API, and you could just have your users technically be using Calendly, but your app is communicating with it. So everything is working together, right? Sometimes people will start that way. And then once they get to the point of wanting to customize that functionality more, then they'll build it within their own apps, or maybe they'll build it within their own apps to start because maybe the service that they want to connect to is more expensive and they're just starting out, they want to save some money. So they build it in their app to start, but maybe when they scale and they no longer want to spend the time managing or building on top of that, well, then maybe they connect via API at that point. They're happy to spend a little bit more money to save a little bit more time. So there are different ways that you can look at this, but the thing I want you to remember is that you can build most features using no-code tools. If you run into any situation where you have trouble building something that you need, well, in most cases, you can use APIs to further expand your capabilities. Okay, so that's a big thing to keep in mind. APIs are such a valuable asset for you to leverage if you need to. Okay, so again, make sure you keep that in mind in terms of, or, when really asking what is actually possible on no code. Now, the last thing that I want to touch on in this section is responsive apps, mobile apps, hybrid apps. Now, we do have another video that does a deep dive into the differences between responsive apps, mobile apps, native apps. So if this is a big question you have, then you need to go and watch that video. But I'm going to do a quick overview here just to give you an idea again of what's possible. But building responsive apps. So responsive apps are apps that are going to work on different screen sizes. Okay. So with Bubble, for example, you can, and with most platforms, you can build responsive apps because maybe you want to be able to use your app on a desktop or a phone or a tablet, right? And that allows your app to be used across different devices. Now, a mobile app, I find that there's a little bit of misuse, or maybe a little bit of misunderstanding about what a mobile app actually is. A lot of people hear mobile app and they think about apps that you are downloading from the app stores. Well, a mobile app, so technically we have web apps and we have native apps. Web apps are apps that you use through a web browser. So of all the examples that we went through, if you're using any of them through your web browser and you're not downloading them from the app stores, then you're using a web app. Now, a web app can be responsive, right? So if I had Airbnb open, I'm using Airbnb through my web browser, and let's say I, make my screen size smaller, well, then it's going to adjust and I can still use it. Now, a mobile app is not actually an app that you download from the app store. A mobile app would be a web app that you're using on a mobile device. So if you take your phone and you go to your web browser and you open up Airbnb on your web browser on your phone, then you're using a mobile app. Now, the reason why I'm specifying that is because a native app is an app that works natively with your device. And these are the apps that you're going to be downloading from the App Store. So some apps will have web apps and native apps, like Airbnb. So if I went to the App Store and I downloaded Airbnb, let's say that I was staying at a home somewhere on a vacation and I had an issue and I wanted to message the host and I wanted to add a picture of a leak in a pipe that I found in the bathroom. Okay, so I could, in the Airbnb app, access that image from my device and send it through Airbnb. So the app is interacting with my device. Okay, so that is a native app, right? Now, a hybrid app is a little bit different. So there are some no-code platforms where you can build native apps. That means the app you're building is an app you can put directly into the App Store. Some no-code platforms are built for web apps. That means that the app you're building is a web app, and so it can't go directly into the App Store. So with Bubble, for example, you're building web apps on Bubble, but if you want to put it into the App Store, you can, but you have to change it from being a web app to what would be called a hybrid app. So if we have web apps, we have native apps, and if on Bubble you're building web apps, but you want to put it into the App Store, well, then you create a hybrid app. Okay, and this is where you wrap your app and you give it the features and functionality, the interactivity with your device that you need, and then you can put it into the App Store. So it's technically a web app, but you can wrap it and put it into the App Store. So my reason in going through that, and again, we have a video that does a deep dive. My reason for going through that is to show you what's possible on no code. You can build responsive apps. You can build mobile apps. You can build native apps. You can build hybrid apps. You can build all of these apps using no code tools. Okay, so hopefully that full overview gives you a good idea of the types of things you can build on no code. Now, one of the biggest questions that people have are, what are the limitations of no code? And this is a question that it's hard to give as cut and dry of an answer as most people are looking for. So if you have been trying to figure out what are the limitations? What limitations should I be worried about? And you can't find a solid answer anywhere of, like, I can only have X many users, or I can only have, like hard cutoff lines. If you've been looking for that and you haven't found it, it's because there isn't necessarily a cut and dry answer. So I don't want to just leave you with that, because that might be frustrating. I want to help you answer this question so that you can feel more confident, just with no code in general. And we're going to go through some examples and just thoughts and ideas, things for you to keep in mind. So going back to Bubble. Now, we were speaking at a conference last year, and Emmanuel, who's one of the founders of Bubble, he was speaking, and the question came up, or maybe he was speaking to the question of scalability, right? Maybe the number one question on everyone's minds when they come into the no-code space. The question was, could you build Twitter on no code? Like Twitter as it is today. Go onto Twitter, look at it, look at the volume, right? Look at how many people are using Twitter. It's everywhere. Everybody knows what Twitter is. Could you build that on no code? And his answer was, no, you couldn't take Twitter as it is today and build that on no code. Right now, that might be off-putting to some people, but you really have to think through this a little bit more before you make a decision, because that statement is probably rather irrelevant to you. So I want you to think about these things. And I don't say this to like convince you of anything. I just want to sort of give you a reality check, because when you're stepping into this space, you're doing something new, you're planning to build and launch an app, invest your time, your money, your energy, and you have these concerns, there's going to be some hesitation that goes along with that. But you need to know how to logically think through these things, because it is probably all new to you. And I want you to be able to make the smartest decisions for you and your app and your business. So think about this, even with code. So even if you were to say, okay, if I can't build Twitter as it is today on no code, then I'm going to go and outsource this to a development agency to build it for me, right? That's going to be hard for you to do. It just is. I mean, think about, number one, how long has Twitter been around? How many iterations has it gone through? How many developers do you think work on Twitter? I mean, how much time and money do you think has gone into changing the code, coming up with the code, perfecting the code? I mean, so much. That's not, if you're turned off by the statement that, you couldn't build Twitter as it is today on no code, well, you're going to have a hard time doing that regardless of how it's built. That's just the reality. The question you really need to be asking is, do you need to start with Twitter as it is today? Okay, so this is like a disconnect I see, where people think, well, if I'm going to hit a limitation where I can't have this many millions of users, then maybe I shouldn't do this after all. But like, do you need to start with Twitter as it is today? No, definitely not. No, you just don't. You don't even have to answer that for yourself, because I'm going to help you answer it. You don't have to do that. You need to start with something smaller. You don't need to build the features that Twitter has today. In this hypothetical scenario where a Twitter type app is what you're building, you don't need to support that many users. You don't need to support that volume. You just don't need that. You just don't. And so think about that, right? If you are concerned that you might not be able to scale to X number of users, and you can't find the answer of literally exactly the number of users, or the how much data you can process, or whatever it is, if you can't find that exact answer, you have to ask the question, do you need to start with that today? Or are you thinking about a hypothetical future that realistically may or may not happen, and will probably have a lesser likelihood of happening if you aren't able to take easier steps to get there in the first place? So do you need to start with it? Now, the next question, and it's all related, but it's, should you plan to build elsewhere? So some people come into the no-code space and they think, okay, no code is just for very basic MVPs. So I'm just going to get something like a prototype up really, really quickly. And then I'm going to plan to build elsewhere, maybe on a different platform. Maybe the plan is to then outsource after that. And so some people come in thinking they already need a plan for this. And I would disagree with that, because you're planning for a problem that, number one, you don't have. And number two, you, again, might not ever have. You might not ever have that problem for two reasons. You might not have that problem because you might not get there, right? That's not a known fact that you will, scale to whatever level it is. And you might not ever run into that problem because it might never be a problem when you're using no code, right? So should you plan to rebuild elsewhere? I would say no. Don't come into this thinking, okay, I'm just going to use this for my prototype, unless you are using a platform that's like super, super basic, very templated. But if you're coming in and you're using something like Bubble that has just a lot of power and gives you a lot of options, I wouldn't plan to build elsewhere unless you are dealing with some sort of compliance need, some sort of like law or something like that. So for example, in the US, we have HIPAA laws, which relates to handling sensitive patient information. So if Bubble isn't HIPAA compliant, if you need an app that is HIPAA compliant, well, then you're going to need to plan, and you want to use Bubble, you're going to need to plan to rebuild elsewhere down the road. So for example, let's say that your app is being built for hospitals to use for their processes, and those processes involve patient data in some way. But maybe your first version app or your MVP doesn't actually need to involve the patient data, and it's just going to involve the initial processes. Well, using something like Bubble, even knowing that it's not HIPAA compliant, well, you can still get your MVP into the hands of your users at the hospitals. You can sell it to hospitals. You can start generating a revenue. You can start getting your app out there. And then when you do need to expand it to those later stages, well, then you actually have, ideally, the capital to justify that. And then you can go and rebuild elsewhere if you need to. But so I wouldn't plan on needing to do that unless there's something really specific like that you just already know is something that you're going to be dealing with. Okay. Now, I like to ask this question whenever people are thinking, well, is no code really for me? So think back to everything we've talked about. The platforms, low code versus no code, all of the things that are possible, the APIs, the different types of apps, responsive, native, all of these things, right? And some people are still thinking, well, there might be limitations that I just don't know yet. And so I'm not going to move forward, or I'm going to put off moving forward. I'm going to procrastinate. The question I like to ask is, what are your alternatives, right? Because usually, almost all the time, if you're trying to launch an app, to launch a business, to grow a business, well, if you don't leverage no code and the benefits that it gives you, the convenience, the speed, the differences in cost, all of those things, and what else are you going to do? Are you going to outsource the development of your app to a traditional development agency and spend $100,000 on the MVP alone when you're at your very initial stages with your app and with your business? Is that something you're actually going to do? Like, are you saying, well, if I don't use no code, then this is what I'm going to do? Most people, that's not the case, right? Most people don't have the option of spending the $100,000 or $200,000 or whatever it may be. For most people, if they don't use no code, well, then you're not moving forward at all. And so if you're worried about limitations, even after everything that we've gone through, then you have to sit down and ask yourself, what's your alternative? And really, I'll jump down to this one here. The question shouldn't be, what are the limitations? The question you should be asking is, what is no code going to enable me to achieve? To me, that's a smart question to ask. It's not just because of being in the no-code space and having a business that helps people leverage no-code for their own businesses, right? It's not just because of that. It's because this is the smart way to think as an entrepreneur. It's not what are my limitations. If you think like that, you're going to struggle to build your app, to launch your app, to build your business, not just with the technical components, with everything, right? Because you're always going to be trying to solve problems that you don't have. And that's going to take your focus away from the things that you actually need to be focusing on, right? So the smarter question to ask is, what is this going to enable me to achieve? If you look at it that way, then there is a lot you can accomplish with no code. Now, we're going to touch on this last one here. We'll jump back a little bit on why there's no hard answer necessarily, because I know this might be you, but I know there are people out there who they just want a hard answer of I can have this many users on my app. I can have this much going on in my app at one time, because it would be easier, right? Just to know, just to see the numbers and have something definitive. But there isn't a hard answer because, no code is still evolving, right? Think about going back to our Twitter example. Twitter has been evolving over the years, and so has its code, right? And so have the developers who have worked on Twitter, right? Everything has evolved, and the evolution comes from the demand and the necessity, the need, right? It's when we need to grow, then we figure out how to grow. We're going to evolve as the product evolves, right? It kind of happens together. And no code is evolving too. And so, if you think back to when Twitter was very first launched, well, did you even know about no code back then? Right? It's such a new thing, relatively speaking, that it is evolving right now too. And it is evolving in the same way, based on the need, based on the demand. So, if you're thinking about what no code can handle and you want those hard numbers, you have to understand that these platforms and the space as a whole, the people who are evolving no code, they're evolving it based on need. So as apps are now being built using no code tools and they're now scaling using no code tools, well, when they scale, now these no code platforms and the people who are working on expanding the no code space, well, they're working to meet the demands and the needs in the exact same way that it happens, outside of no code too. That's just the way it works. And so I wouldn't look for hard answers because that means there's a finish line. We don't want a finish line. So I would look for, again, this. What will doing this one thing, what will using a no code platform to launch my first version app enable me to achieve? And then grow. And then figure out the next thing that you need to do, and the next, and the next, and the next. And your app is going to evolve, and no code is going to continue to evolve. And the chances of you having some big issue and really having validation for any early worries are so slim. Okay. And again, for those of you, and if you are thinking this, for those of you who really just want a hard number, think through all of this, right? This is what you should really be thinking about to help you move forward and actually leverage no code. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. I know this has been a longer video, but this is a question that has so many different pieces and that so many people ask because, people stumble across the no code space in so many different ways, and just figuring out whether or not it's for you, what you can do, what you can use, how to think about the future. All of these are questions that you need to be able to answer in order to, number one, use no code in the first place. Number two, if you're already using it, to use it a little bit more confidently so you can feel good about putting in the time and the energy, the money into the thing that you are building, right? So I hope this helps you move forward more confidently. Now, if you are building an app on no code, and if you want help with that, we have a free workshop that does a deep dive into the next steps to help you plan out your app, to help you strategically divide up your development, testing, and launch phases. to help you understand how to best use the tools that are available to you and really move forward with your app in the correct way. So you can head to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop to join in on that and to really take the next big step with your app, right? Because again, ask yourself, what is this going to enable me to achieve? What are the possibilities? There's so much that you can do with no code. And so I hope this helps you take that next big step. And again, if you want to do a deeper dive into that, you can head to coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop. All right, I hope this has been helpful for you. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.